This episode is sponsored by Promising Pathways Scholarships. Promising Pathways Scholarships provides funding for post-secondary education and free career coaching for hard-of-hearing students or single-parent students. Promising Pathways Scholarships will be hosting their first fundraiser called Find Your Path, a virtual walk-run beginning on April 5th, which is National Walking Day, and ending on April 30th. You can learn more at promising-pathways.org. Hi, everyone. This is the Ego Project, and I am Lisa Heidle, and I am here with
Cristine Seidell.
And we are here with
Eric Goldstein.
Very nice. Okay, great. Today, I'm so excited. We are going to be talking about the ego and masculinity, which in past episodes, if you've listened, you will know Lisa knows nothing about. But we're going to be learning today, and Eric's going to guide us. First, we want to encourage everyone to go back and listen to our last video, which was with Hannah and Haley Newland, who talked about self-identity. They are identical twins, and it was such a vulnerable and insightful episode. I loved it. What do you think, Cristine?
I thought it was two great guests for such an awesome conversation. I mean, what a paradox to have twins and talk about individual identity, but what wonderful things we learned through that conversation. So
I think so too. I had so many takeaways from it. So, and every time I listened to it, I'm like, oh, I'd never thought of it that way before. And, I have a solo birth, so I had no idea, the work they have to do that's some serious self-identity work. So
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Are we ready to get started?
I think so. I'm excited.
I think so.
And yeah.
Okay, I'm going to read your bio, Eric, and then you can add anything that you feel is pertinent to that. Eric Goldstein is a father, brother, son, friend, artist, and teacher. With 4 sisters and 2 daughters, he understands the importance of being a positive model of masculinity. Eric is the creative director and owner of EGD Agency, a boutique creative agency based in Atlanta. With his team, he collaborates to craft authentic branded identities, stories, and experiences for clients and partners. He has worked with top-tier brands like Google, Reebok, Emory University, Atari, and Hasbro. He occasionally plays in a band and enjoys immersive experiences like Burning Man, Meow Wolf, and Sleep No More. Most recently, he has enjoyed getting his hands dirty on his daughter's farm and unplugging from our tech-forward world. Very nice.
Yeah.
That's a professional bio if I've ever heard of one.
No, that sounds good.
Yeah, the daughter's farm, it's kind of like being a grandparent. You get to go visit it and work on it and have all the fun and then leave.
Yeah, right. And as soon as you pull up, like literally you're put to work, and it's hard and it's cathartic and it's beautiful.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
Good. And what is the name of the farm again? Do you want to say?
Yeah, no, it's a small holding farm. So you can check it out on Instagram. It's at Small Holding Farm. And they're in Morganton, North Carolina, about 50 miles outside of Asheville. And it's a no-till 2-acre property. And they're doing everything from markets to CSAs, and they've got their hands in all sorts of different things, including now fungi for restaurants and chefs and different experiences. So she's expanding, and they're doing great.
Very cool. Very cool.
Interesting. Yeah, that's I think that's the direction we're going. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to jump in with, let's all 3 of us discuss the word masculine through our own personal lens. But we're going to start with Eric. I'm curious about your idea of masculinity, being born male. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think a great way for me to open up is I've now told 2 or 3 people, very close friends, that I was doing this project with you guys, and on the topic of masculinity. And the first thing out of their mouth are just a large laugh. and they're laughing the fact that I'm being asked to talk about masculinity. And I found that really insightful, because at first my ego was like, wait, what does that mean? You know? And then I was like, oh, that's actually the reason we're having this conversation, is because their perception of who I am based on what I do for a living, how I look, how I dress, how I sound, maybe the things that I'm interested in, don't quite align with the general constructs of masculinity that's been defined over generations. Yeah. You know, so for that, this is giving me an opportunity to take a step back and look at both the energies of both feminine and masculinity, to really understand how those energies actually live within me in my everyday function. Yeah. So if I was to define masculinity, I was having a conversation with Lisa a couple of weeks ago, and I said I could almost define better feminine energy, and then the rest of it for me is that other thing, that other masculine, you know.
All the rest, right? Everything else.
Yeah, and I think it is because of how much exposure I've had to the feminine. You know, even though with the 4 sisters and the 2 daughters, there's both existing of feminine and masculine within all of us. I just resonated towards the empathetic, the more open, the more sharing, the more less aggressive. I don't know. That's what was happening for me, was looking at that comparison and associating myself more as the feminine energy, but still being a very masculine male, you know? Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that's answering your question, but that's how it's showing up for me right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
It does. And I think it's interesting, because I think when people hear the word masculine, based on the structure in our conditioning and, you know, our culture, those words like aggressive, right, come up. Ego is often connected to the masculine. So often, you know, he's got a big ego, he's egoistic, you know, all of this aspect of ego typically gets attached to the masculine. Yet feminine can also have the ego, right? Because as we define ego here, it is the healed or the wounded aspects of the ego, because we all have ego, right? And so I think it's so interesting, some of the language that gets attached to masculine. So I'm curious, Cristine, like you see in your practice, you see men and women, right? And non-binary. And so can you speak a little bit to what you see with the masculine energy coming in through the therapeutic lens?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, when we talk about like polarity and just the energetics of us individually having, you know, both masculine and feminine energies within us, and how we can move in and out of those energies depending on what situation or what's being presented to us. You know, masculine from a very healthy, healed perspective is the energy of initiation, activation, pursuit. So it is kind of the like go energy, the give energy. Let me pursue, protect, cherish. Let me activate in that way. Whereas the feminine is more of the receiving energy, or the energy of receiving that activation and then in response, validating, affirming, respecting, you know, kind of that nurturing, compassion, forgiving, right? Like giving the things back after receiving. So, you know, when we work from that perspective of a healthy masculine is really one that is in the energy of initiating, activation, pursuing, protecting, cherishing, provision. If we're in a healed state, we have a very gentle masculine energy, right? And it is clear. The masculine is very clear on what to activate in, what to initiate in, what to protect. But when we're doing work around the masculine, so when we're working from that wounded place, we tend to have more of a toxic perspective of masculinity, which would bring, you know, activation now looks like aggression, right? Pursuing looks like chasing. you know, and consuming, right? Pursuing is consuming from a commodity perspective. And provision sometimes looks like, look at my status rather than let me care for from a providing place. So you see how the masculine, just like the feminine and all these other facets of self, are on a spectrum of wounded to healed, and you can fall and ebb and flow at times based upon triggers. But that's how, from a therapeutic perspective, we kind of see and view masculine. Yeah.
I think it's so interesting because what we've talked before on the Ego Project, Cristine and I, about how, you know, we have the masculine and feminine energies inside of all of us, which Eric, you've touched upon, as Cristine, and they're always fluid. They're always moving and being activated. So as an example, you know, a very simplistic way, the way that, you know, kind of helps me understand is, you know, I have an idea. That's my divine feminine energy, right? Oh, I'm going to write a story, as an example. And then my divine masculine energy says, oh, okay. And I start doing research, or I start, you know, actually creating it, you know, putting it into practice. And we do that all the time. And then my divine feminine has, you know, more, helps develop it. And I'm constantly moving between the two. I find that when I get out of balance between the two, I'm either too much of the feminine, where I'm just almost passive at times. It doesn't feel good. And then when I'm too much in my masculine, just go, go, go. Yeah. Set them up, knock them down, set them up. That feels uncomfortable for me too. So I like to try to keep them in balance. And we want to talk a little bit about your journey, you know, because Cristine and I have our own personal journeys, but your journey as a masculine, as a father, brother, partner, and as a creative, Eric, I'm curious because creativity has almost a feminine feel to it, right? So can you talk a little bit about your own, like how you were raised, you know, and as a creative and moving through the world?
Yeah. So talking about how I was raised, I mean, like in the context of like just the dynamic that I had growing up.
Yeah, like what did
the
you
family and
your modeling for masculinity, your expectations for masculinity?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So it's complex and it's beautiful. So I grew up. My parents got divorced when I was young, and my father was a very successful hairdresser who had multiple salons in Delaware and Pennsylvania and Florida, and while he was a hairdresser, he was a straight hairdresser, and he to me personified masculinity at its finest, almost machismo qualities, you know. And on the other side, I grew up in my other home with my mom and my stepfather, and it was just a little bit more it was more subtle. It was more kind of in both cases, both male figures didn't necessarily demonstrate much feminine empathy, connection. Like there was safety, there was a support. You know, I always felt safe in all of these environments, which was great. But I think it was because I had these multiple sisters, whether it was my birth sister, a half sister, I have 2 stepsisters. And so I got to experience a lot of dynamics as sort of the second oldest child in that equation, that I think was really formulating for me what really had helped me resonate and lean into the things that felt right to me, you know? And at times that was polarized by my community and the world that I was living within. And so for example, you know, I grew up in both houses, sports were always playing. I didn't like sports. I was more like I want to create, I want to produce, I want to play, I want to, but that I didn't have the my own construct of masculinity. I didn't have it where there wasn't necessarily a strong competitive nature to myself. And but also, like, I could see when looking at like the machismo of my father, I could see the things that I could rub up that were rubbing onto me, and then trying that on in life, and realizing that some of those things weren't really a good fit for me, you know. And so you kind of try, you burn, you see what kind of damage it can cause, you see what kind of promise it can bring, and what effort and energy it takes on you. So it wasn't really until we started having these conversations that I was able to even reflect on it. Like, I've never sat back to understand what role did masculinity or femininity play in my life, and still does. So I'm grateful for this conversation. What was the other side of the question?
As a creative, you know, being
Yeah.
able to tap into that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So I had an experience last night. Actually, I was talking to a client in Taiwan, and I was presenting this creative to her. And creative, being a thought leader in a creative industry, everything that we do, it's all subjective. And so you have to choose a position of confidence. You have to choose a position of knowledge. There's also, like it being subjective, there's how do you convince your clients and your partners that your ideas are sound, and that they're actually hiring you for value and for your experience. And in last night's call, so the client is a woman, she's in Taiwan, and for an hour I walked her through this presentation, and I find that I lean way into my feminine energy when I'm presenting, because of the connection that I have with my fellow partners or clients. And the mileage that I get with them, and the connection, the approvals, the resonance of that engagement I completely, I'm grateful for the feminine side that allows me to understand how they're hearing it, to understand what they're hearing, and for them to feel that but then there's the masculine side where it's like, I'm taking care of you. You know, I'm going to bat for you. Like, that's the doing, that's the producing side of it. But I think the longevity of my client engagements in a creative industry is because I'm going to use the word soft, but I'm soft in terms of having empathy and compassion for what it's like for them, as opposed to, I work with a lot of creatives, and some are women, and their masculine comes out, and sometimes it's off-putting to me, you know. So you can just, we all experience that from every person that we work with, and there is the spectrum, to Cristine's point. But I'm very aware of what was happening last night on that call that was so successful for all of us, was because I lean into slowing down, not being aggressive, understanding what their needs are, and having them feel comforted.
I think the whole conversation around being a creative and that being your profession, you know, and that being, you know, a space where, you know, you have this agency that you have to navigate as a business, but then, you know, also produce from a very creative space. That is such a cool aspect of the masculine and feminine, because, you know, fundamentally, when you're talking to people about brand, when you're talking to people about the optics, the presentation, you know, how that's a very personal thing, that you are really attending to the person that is coming to you for brand. Like, that's a whole, that you can almost not come to them from a masculine being like, you know, I am, you know, I'm coming here, I'm gonna do this for you, and this is the way, you know, let me care for you in this way, like bam, bam, bam. here I am activating, for
Yeah.
some, that is a very personal thing to a business owner. I mean, they
Yeah.
want to feel seen and heard and attended to, and that you've actually tuned in to the brand, which is them, enough to really know
Mhm.
that. I mean, that is, the feminine, but the masculine part is then you're able to shift it into, okay, now that I've tuned into you, now that I'm attending to your needs, let me make this happen.
Yeah.
So it is this, you really are in the dance from a business owner, from a profession of the creative. And Lisa, I know that you kind of have experienced the same thing. The inspiration comes, the activation follows. But again, you're creating from a space of also attending to the people who are going to read this or are going to see it.
Yeah. No, sorry to interrupt, but you bring up a really good point. When you think about ideation and brainstorming, just like in a relationship where vulnerability can have a place of birth, if you will. Whenever I find myself in a collaborative space with whether it's the clients or other designers or producers or creatives, it's when when someone or myself kind of opens up and says, I'd like to share something. And oftentimes I say, there's no bad ideas here, like it's a safe space. Like that's so feminine to me, is I just want to say something, like words are going to come out of a male's voice, out of a male's mouth right now, that says, we're creating a safe space so that we can all feel comforted to offer any ideas, because every idea is probably going to spawn some idea or morsel that we should take into consideration. So even in that, there's the feminine. But then, like, for example, late last night, I was at a friend's house and we were trying to construct this out of bamboo outside. We were creating this walkway with these 16 pieces of bamboo, trying to figure out what is the method of, adhering this to the ground and blah, 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 blah. And there you have two males who are very good at being honest, open, exposed, trying, listening, like ego in that relationship is out. And it's almost like there is no masculine, there's no feminine. It's like we're hovering in this ambiguous space of energy that's not tied to any one perspective. And then, sorry if I'm talking too much.
No, I mean, you're just like lighting, all the lights are kind of.
Okay, so in contrast to that, about a year ago, I was helping a friend move a chimney, a fire stove out of a house onto a trailer to take up to the farm, my daughter's farm. And it's actually my daughter's stepfather. So you had dad and stepdad working together to do this thing. And the energy, it was so clear during that collaboration, if you will. It was maybe an hour of collaborating, but the approach was very different from both parts. And I found myself taking a step back and be like, this energy is pretty difficult for me to navigate. I was having a hard time having a voice by which to offer my suggestion, because the other side was so powerful, and it wasn't as gratifying as I had wanted it to be. And it has nothing to do with him. I love him to death, like that's what's beautiful about it. But in terms of collaborating, you definitely, as a creative, it's so energetically driven that it can fall flat or it can soar, and you're just like, oh my gosh,
Yeah. I mean, the fact that, I just love that you took this conversation to a space of, where you're moving in and out of those energies to get to this kind of ambiguous space is really, I think, what we should aspire to be, personally, in ourselves, in our work relationships, in our partnerships, in our friendships, is that we don't have to stand firm in I am the masculine, you are the feminine, or I am a masculine, or I am a feminine, individually. Your example of creating a collaborative space and just kind of being like, hey, listen, there are no bad ideas, is not, it is ambiguous, because the feminine was inspired to be nurturing and open and able to attend. The masculine protected that space, saying, hey, listen, there are no bad ideas here. This is a safe space. That's protection, right? So that's what I think we all should be aspiring to as we grapple with some of our woundedness in the masculine feminine, is that individually, in our work relationships, in our partnerships, we should be able to ebb and flow based upon the situation, the layer of vulnerability that's showing up, and kind of sensing, in what way do I need to move through this? And I think that, from childhood, as we have different experiences, we do get this concept of I have to be this or they have to be that. And that, that really kind of holds us back from evolving into, what we're supposed to be,
Yeah. And I think that's also a testament to what's happening in our culture now, over the last 5 years, with having conversations around fluidity, around gender. Like, you have younger generations that are really challenging our assumptions of what it has been like for thousands of years, and turning it on its head and really bringing those conversations to the table. I mean, I was telling Lisa, I think I was telling you last time I was at a fire pit one night, and I was having a conversation with two college professors and two lawyers. And we started getting into the conversation of pronouns, and we were just talking about it. And I said, I adapted that on my LinkedIn profile. And they were surprised, like, you did that, and then really using that time in that 10 or 15 minute conversation, I was like this observer of watching 4 men grappling with feeling exposed in front of each other, that they had to bring jokes into it to protect themselves from just being open and vulnerable and talking about it. And I think that's been the biggest detriment to masculinity evolving in our culture, is that we haven't created a space to have these conversations, and everything and all of it is great. It's like, to your point, it's on a spectrum, it's fluid. We all ebb and flow with both of those energies. So I think it's a healthy topic.
It is, absolutely.
We had an amazing conversation with Reese Torvald Hansen and on gender identity, and that was a very valuable conversation for me to have, that someone who is non-binary and uses they them pronouns, sharing their experience and how they have, their journey has led them to that path. And I think that's so powerful what you said, because females tend to talk more, we tend to be a little more vulnerable. We've cultivated that safe space in order to do that. And that's not every female, of course, but the majority of us can say, hey, I'm struggling right now. Just saying those words is a release, right? And I don't see someone who says they're struggling as weak. I'm like, oh, that's so brave and vulnerable to say that, right? And that's a sign of strength to me, for someone to say, ooh, I could use a little support. And so my view of masculines, so many that I've seen is, and of course, not to be too, just talking universally, it's almost competitive. There's this jostling, like, I'm more powerful, I make more money, I do, my job is more, is higher level. Like, I see so much of that competition. And to me, that looks like that to them is masculine. Their bank account is how they identify as a strong masculine. So do you see that a lot, Cristine, in your practice?
Yeah, and I think that's where we get the toxic masculinity manifestation is pursuing can turn into competition, right? But pursuing is only, it's only masculine when the feminine part reflects what you pursue with intention, right? So that's why each person, again, why we have these energies is if you withdraw into that feminine intuitive, space, you get the inspiration, and then you pursue with intention. But what we have as a culture is we've talked about masculinity is that you just pursue without being satiated, right? And that's where we get this chase, whether it's money, whether it's this, they just say, go, be, achieve, go, conquer, whatever, right? You're a hunter, but it's only healthy, healed masculine energy when the feminine part, whether it's within themselves or within a work relationship or a partnership, is reflecting what to pursue with intention. Pursuit without intention is just chasing. And that's where you get a very dysregulated sense of masculinity.
Oh, that's so powerful. And as you were saying that, I reflect on how we've offloaded our gender, the masculine, feminine energy onto the genders, right? So as an example, I was born female, I'm comfortable in my feminine energy. And in some relationships, I've offloaded my masculine energy onto my partner. Okay, so you go do masculine, even though that's a part of me, right? And I'm ignoring it. And so, and if that partner does the same thing, requiring me to do all the emotional work in the relationship, all the caretaking, all that, while they're out pursuing, then you're out of balance because both of you are out of balance, right? We should have, right now, we have 6 energies at work in this conversation, right? So, and I think that's interesting. So I find that interdependent relationships where you're both using your masculine, feminine energy, that's what the ideal, that's what we're working toward. Yeah.
And you'll notice whether it's in, you talked about even within yourself, when you're not in alignment, right? In relationships, when our energetics are off, meaning we are either in an energy too much that we don't want to be, or our partner's not showing up in an energy that we need, that's where we get a lot of wobbles, So having conversations around roles within different situations and how to be more of a fluid type of energetic. There are some things from our own wounding that we may need our partner to show up a little bit more in that energetic for us, and having open conversations in relationships about that. But oftentimes we don't, we kind of are just like, well, nope, I'm female here. I'm the feminine. You need to give, you need to pursue me, protect me, cherish me. And then I'll tell you, you're doing a good job, and that's not satisfying, and vice versa. So, knowing that these are energies that we all have and our partners have, and we need to receive and we need to give, but having those honest conversations so that we don't get stuck in the stereotypical rut of these.
Yeah, I mean, what's coming up for me as the two of you are talking about this is I'm aware of where I have failed in my relationships, in communication, especially where it became combative, and the masculine in me, the masculine that I had defined for myself, comes up and says, you need to be combative just like that, and come at it with that energy. And that's not authentic to how I would want to resolve the conflict, but it's what I'm hearing is needed. It's what I'm convincing myself that how I should be.
Right.
And I fail miserably because I don't know how to cultivate, or I haven't cultivated a way of saying, actually, can we stop for a second? Because I think the feminine in me has a better solution, or I could probably show it better if it's not as combative, or, and yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, I can now look back at other relationships and see where I was doing a disservice to myself and the partner because I wasn't leveraging the strength of my most prominent energy to help me resolve that either conflict or engagement or creating a space or whatever.
Yeah.
And I look back at my masculine going, dude, why didn't you like learn this in school? You know, like,
Yeah, right. Why don't we teach this stuff? Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
You know, that's so powerful, Eric, because I think the masculine energy in all of us, the wounded aspect of that is I must win at all costs.
Mm-hmm.
I must win. And that's no matter what gender you're in, that feeling of, you know, as opposed to we will find a solution at all costs. And that should be the goal of the masculine, is solution focused. You know, it's us against the problem, not us against each other. Right?
Yeah.
Feeling. Yeah. So I'm so glad that you shared that, because I know that resonates with me. And I think that's going to resonate with our listeners a lot as well. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, now that I'm looking back at it, I mean, there's just so many times where I'm like literally using the timeout symbol, like pause, time, stop. Because I need to regroup. I need to not be enmeshed in the conflict, to be thoughtful and mindful of a response. I'm not always responsible to myself or my partner in doing that. And so I'm showing up how I think they're needing and wanting me to be. And that is masculine. And that is a direct conflict to how I can peacefully move through that forward in a successful way. So this has been very insightful to help me realize more of my fault. So thank you.
Well, and it's that wounding, right? We have that. Yeah. And, you know, I mean, I think that's why we talk to people, and we talk to people that we trust, and we talk to therapists and coaches and trusted, you know, confidants, because that's how you learn, you know. And, you know, I grew up in a family that, you know, truly the fight wasn't over till someone left. So if someone's still hanging around, we must still be fighting. The fight's still going on, right? And it took me a long time to realize that, oh no, you know, we can resolve this, we can take a break, we can approach it when we're both patient, we can agree to disagree. You know, it's not about the win. It's about sure the relationship is intact and healthy. And
I'm also lucky that I've had the opportunity to be in the presence of my daughters, who could see how I was acting out in a conflict or whatever, and actually hold space for me and say, you know, we noticed that you do this, you know. And I just never, until really now that we're having this topic come up, that I would probably be able to reflect on it a little healthier. Because I was at first, when especially you have you have two young women who are pointing a flaw, what I perceive as a flaw.
Right. Yep.
The masculine sees it as a flaw. I'm being called out. It's a flaw. But when they hold that space for me, I'm able to be like, take 5 minutes and come back and say, you're right. I was doing that.
Yeah.
You know? And I know a lot of people don't have the benefit of having these alternate perspectives that, you know, it's a very insightful way to learn, is like in application when it's happening. But even when it's told, like I really feel that, how dare you, you know. And where's that come from? That comes from my just constructs that I've seen in TV, what I've seen in the media, what I've seen growing up, is you don't tell a man, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
You know?
That's the wounding talking.
That's the wounding.
Right.
We all have it, right? So
right.
what advice would you give, Eric, to you know, a boy, man who is ready to kind of do some work? They're seeing that their relationships are not reflecting the level of, you know, happiness, I guess you would say, that they want to have. What piece of advice would you give them around ego work?
That's a really good question, because I don't at this moment in my life, I don't know if I would be the most appropriate source of knowledge, but based on what I've learned and what I'm experiencing, especially at this new chapter of my life, is listen to your gut and be okay that it's different than what you thought it should feel like. And I do think that with how the conversations are blossoming with these new generations, it's going to have the topic has no choice but to grow in a more healthy and positive way. We've just been very stagnant for so many hundreds of years behind us. But what advice I would give is, man, I really don't know. Is listen to, like, just be as honest as you can and know that whatever you're feeling in that state is probably something very real, defined by whether it's your masculine or your feminine, and either and both are wonderful. It's being responsible for yourself and others.
Yeah, I love that.
You know, like, I know that I have done a disservice in relationships and in communication and in collaboration by not being aware of my strengths and my faults based on those energies. So I'm excited about bringing that to the future, and sharing that.
Yeah. Well, I so appreciate your vulnerability of coming here and sharing, you know, your perspective and your experiences. And I think that is, you know, huge for not only your own growth, but for other people to be able to understand and become aware that they too are ready to do a little bit of work. But don't want you to discredit how powerful that is to show up here today and just, you know, be in this space with other people to have an authentic conversation around it and say, I don't know if I have all the answers, but I am definitely learning, right?
You don't hear that from a lot of masculines saying, I'm not really sure. Ask me in a year, you know, that type of thing. You know? And I think that's, once again, I find that beautiful, because, you know, we're all learning. We're here. This is a big classroom, and we're here to learn and get better at being ourselves. And so thank you, Eric, so much for sharing that, and love to have you back in the future. I have no doubt we're going to have more conversations about many different things. Creativity, love to have that conversation in depth with you again. That would be really good with the three of us. Cristine, do you have anything to offer before we sign off?
No, I really like, you know, the suggestion that Eric kind of gave to come down and listen to your gut. I think that is inherently, you know, coming back to intuition, which is the feminine, and the feminine is always here to reflect to us what we need to see so we can transform. And so I think, you know, don't be afraid of sitting with intuition, with sitting with your feminine energy, because the feminine is here to help us connect with the masculine in a way that feels authentic to us. So in your own intuitive experience, Eric, you are guiding us in the right direction as far as how to get started in that work. So I appreciate that.
What? You're welcome.
Look at that.
All right, everyone. So we're going to put all of Eric's information in the description box in the notes, including his link to his website. If you need any branding done, any type of work, which he's amazing. Trust me, you've got to work with this guy. It's a boy.
You're sweet.
I so admire. He thinks so out of the box. And sometimes I'm like, I can't get out of the box. So I always look to Eric to help me with that. So
that's kind. Thank you.
You're welcome. We will go ahead and put information as well for any of our sponsors in the description box, and we will see you next time.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.